all of our lives have stuff like that in it, where like one thing made the difference.
That phenomenon basically led me to have this kind of mantra that like I don't really regret anything I've ever done, no matter how bad it was, because it's all led me to where I am now, and I'm still alive. And changing one thing doesn't even guarantee you're going to get the outcome you wanted.
Well, no, and that in economics is called the seen and the unseen. Like, and when you're talking about the universe, quantum mechanics and stuff, it gets even more impossible.
You decide to go left instead of right, and your life is massively different.
Welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. If you don't have a beer, grab one now. Sit down, because this is going to be a good one. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and we would love it if you'd like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, everything like that. It helps the algorithm, helps us, helps everybody. Probably helps you too.
Name? Casey Rochford. Rank? Bum. Serial number? ksmvidcast.com. And if you want to hang out to the end, you can hear a song that we've written just for you. In fact, just for you. So
one of us wrote it just for you. Maybe both of us.
That's right. Yeah. So hang out, and why don't you head on over to patreon.com/ksmvidcast, and you can get it right the fuck now if you want to, like, you know, throw some money our way. So
yeah, because we basically don't make anything doing this.
So what shall we talk about on this fine evening?
Well, so I think this is going to be a really fun topic. Maybe disturbing to some people, but not in the way you'd think.
Ah, my favorite.
Yeah, like disturbing in the sense of, like, you know, when you look out sitting in a clear night and you look out into space and you think about things and think about the scale of the universe and how just enormous it is and how, wow, man, we are so small. Disturbing like that. Yeah. Huh. So a while ago, we did an episode. Well, I think it was season 2. We did an episode about the Mandela effect. So today, I think we should discuss an entirely different effect, which is not really so woo, but a little more plausible. And that would be the butterfly effect.
Oh, that is, yeah, that's awesome. I think about that a lot, actually. Well, especially like when you become suicidal, like some of the thought processes that you go through in digging yourself out of that is trying to figure out like what major impacts you've had on the world or will have, you know?
Yeah. And how did you get here? You know, that kind of thing. You really get contemplative about your own life. So I guess to start off the episode, we should probably talk about what the butterfly effect is. And I'll give 2 definitions. I'll give the like simple one first.
It's not just an Ashton Kutcher movie.
No. Oh God. Yeah.
Y'all forgot about that, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. so in a nutshell, it's essentially this idea that, like, a butterfly flapping its wings in one part of the world can influence the state of things in such a way that it leads to, like, something major, like a tsunami in another part of the world, right?
Yeah.
Like everything is influenced by these tiny, tiny effects. And the official definition, I guess, the chaos theory definition. Okay, hold on. I have to actually read this one because it gets confusing. The butterfly effect is the sensitive dependence on initial conditions in which a small change in one state of a deterministic nonlinear system can result in large differences in a later state. And I said that after a beer and a half. So
I was with you all the way up to the.
I mean, so there's two different things. I mean, people have this idea that butterfly effect is sort of, oh yeah, a butterfly causes a tornado or something. Well, no, not really. The idea is that there's a lot of these teeny tiny things that have a tiny effect, but that effect is a precursor to other effects, maybe larger effects that all culminate in something huge. And and we don't even consider all these tiny little things that happen. I mean, it happens in nature, probably happens in, well, it certainly happens in the universe, and it happens in our lives. Like, and you know, we could probably talk about all those, but I think maybe focusing on just human life in general and how the butterfly effect is actually very consequential and very significant.
Well, it's certainly a philosophy that can give anyone a sense of meaning to their life, because all you really have to do is start connecting some dots. Like any one thing that you've done, maybe it didn't turn out that great for you, but maybe it's helped somebody else that's close to you, and maybe in turn that person being helped came around and did something later that helped you out. So in a way, like having a little bit of a shitty time for a while actually did you a lot of good in the end. And,
yeah,
you know, and
or maybe that person, some insignificant thing, like a little piece of advice you gave somebody, it impacted some sort of future decision that they made, or maybe made them see things in a completely different light. And perhaps that change caused them to positively impact hundreds or millions of people. You never know. I mean, just one little tiny thing, just helping somebody out, right? One time where you help an old lady across the street, or give somebody some money to help them through a tough time, or whatever, you know, open a door for somebody. I mean, all these things can lead to very significant changes in the future.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and sometimes I wonder, like, about the butterfly effects you don't know about. Like, there was so back in the first season, I made mention of having a brother that was getting drafted to the NFL, right? And, you know, I tried to reach out to him, and it didn't go that well. We should actually do a follow-up episode on that, because that's a whole thing. But
yeah, definitely.
At the beginning of his second year in the NFL, he tore his bicep. And, you know, I don't know this to be the case or not, but like, what if he was so like preoccupied with like, holy shit, I have an older brother that I didn't know about or whatever, and like wasn't paying attention and tore his bicep. Maybe I like screwed up his career.
I mean, that is possible, because, you know, the butterfly effect doesn't necessarily apply to positive things. It could be negative. I think one of the most famous examples of this is the situation like World War I. There's a soldier, I think a British soldier. There's a bunch of Germans that have been injured, and they're running away, and this guy's got a bead on a German soldier, and he's about to shoot, but he's like, you know, the guy's injured, I don't want to shoot him. So he just lets him go. Guy runs away, right? And lives to live another day, essentially. Turns out that guy was Adolf Hitler.
Oh, geez.
So if he'd have shot him, all of the Holocaust stuff probably would not have happened. Now, maybe there could be somebody else who might have filled that role, but Hitler would have been dead in World War I, and none of that stuff would have happened, which would actually not just affect all the Jews and all the people that were killed, all the warfare in general, but it would impact scientific discovery, technological innovation,
Oh yeah.
medicine, like everything from World War II, like all of the things that came out of that, all of the human experiences and all of the things that have happened were a direct result of Hitler having lived. And it's like, how different would the world be if that had not happened? Just a simple press of a trigger and taking out yet another soldier in a pointless war where a bunch of people were killing each other. Man, it's just, that's what I'm saying about, like, this makes you really think about things in a really profound way. Like it's deep. Like,
yeah. Well, something you said made me think that, there's another angle to the butterfly effect. You said, well, maybe somebody else would have brought the Holocaust on, but no, I don't think they would have. Like that was built off of all of Adolf Hitler's personal experiences, like,
yeah,
all of those decisions and all of that, the machinations that led to that were specifically his life and his choices. If he had been taken out with a bullet, the world would be a very different place. And yeah, it probably wouldn't be maybe quite as technologically advanced, but socially it might be a lot more peaceful and
it could be. And
like,
as
it's
they
hard
say,
to say.
as the saying goes, in every revolution there's one man with a vision. Like a lot of I agree. Like most of the fuel behind at least the European side of World War II was driven by Hitler, for the most part, or I guess like facilitated, because you got like Mussolini and some other stuff going on down there.
There's a number of cult of personalities, but they all fed off of each other, and he certainly like took the limelight. So
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And it man, it is crazy to think how different things would be. I mean, there were innovations from World War II that were very significant, things that are really important that we had developed them. But what would we have developed in the absence of all the destruction, the loss of lives, all of these really intelligent people, the changes that happen in the world, like
ancient artifacts that were lost or destroyed,
and the Russia completely changed because of World War II as well. Like all of that may never have happened. Like the Soviet Union might not quite have played out the way that it did with like Lenin and Stalin and stuff like that. Nothing would be the same. All the money that was spent too, just blowing shit up. Like, what if that was diverted in a different way? Who knows? And that's the thing. One decision changed that. That was the focal point in the timeline where things were going one way. And if that guy had decided to fire on that German soldier, they would have diverged entirely differently, like wholly differently. The world would be completely different today.
Yeah.
All because of that one thing, one bullet. Like it's, dude. And, I don't want to focus too much on like big world events and stuff, because all of our lives have stuff like that in it, where like one thing made the difference.
Well, that's the very philosophy that led me to kind of, well, I don't know if philosophy is the right word for the butterfly effect, but that phenomenon basically led me to have this kind of mantra that like, I don't really regret anything I've ever done, no matter how bad it was, because it's all led me to where I am now, and I'm still alive. And as long as I'm above ground, like, whatever.
No, you're right. Like, and that was something I was that comes up in my head thinking about this, that like essentially regret is pointless unless you control the state of every single particle in the universe, because all these tiny things that you may have control over, things you may not have control over, can profoundly impact the state of the world, the conditions in which you exist and make your decisions, right? Like, unless you have control over all of it, like if you're a god, I guess, then you can have regret, but you can't regret things. It's like, you don't know the future. You don't know the intricacies of how everything connects together, this web of cause and effect. Like, you don't know what effect your decisions are going to have on yourself or the world around you. Like, you can't control the things that came before that set up those conditions. So fuck it. Like, why regret things? As long as you try, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to think that most
regret's one of those words that can be used in like a couple different contexts and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'll say I regret things like hurting someone or whatever, or something that has in the moment led me into kind of a shitty situation or whatever. But as far as like, if I actually had a chance to go back in time and change something, no, I don't think I would.
No, because even the bad things, the things that at the time may have seemed bad, may have actually been important turning points.
Yeah.
That allowed what in the future, or allowed the things in the future to happen.
Well, and changing one thing doesn't even guarantee you're going to get the outcome you wanted.
Well, no, and that in economics is called the seen and the unseen. Like, and when you're talking about the universe, quantum mechanics and stuff, it gets even more impossible.
Yeah, and then you're like losing all the good things that you had accumulated because the butterfly effect. Like you decide to go left instead of right, and your life is massively different. Like, it didn't seem like that big of a deal at the time, right?
Sure, exactly. You could say, well, I regret this thing that I did, and I want to point out, because this occurred to me when you were talking about that, like the different, like there's multiple ways of seeing regret. Yeah, I mean, to me, I see regret as kind of a moment to reflect on what you've done in your life, kind of look at it from an engineering standpoint. Like, hey, that was a mistake. What could I do in the future so that I don't make such a mistake? That's okay. But beating yourself up over something that there's no way you could have known the outcome over, it doesn't make any sense.
Should we even be trying to avoid mistakes then?
No. In fact, that's the whole thing. Failure is the best teacher. That's why we are so good at things now.
No, but I mean, like, maybe this is a little bit like nihilistic, but like, what's the point in bettering ourselves? What if we're just cheating ourselves of something greater?
Yeah.
By bumbling into it like a dumb fuck. And like, well, and we're sitting here trying to get enlightened, and we're like not making these stupid decisions that could have led to like solving world hunger.
Well, think about it. How many really important revelations, I guess, or technological improvements have been made purely by accident. It happens more often than you think. And like very significant things too, completely by accident. So maybe making mistakes is the way to find those things. It's kind of like because I have this kind of philosophy of like viewing life as a game, like a video game, and that's how people discover these hidden Easter eggs, or these little tricks, is purely through mistake. Like, they just happen to be in the right place at the right time in the game, and they do this thing, and whoa, I just slipped through that wall. That would never happen if people were playing exactly by the book. And so that I think that's a hopeful thing for people too. Like, don't worry so much about making mistakes or failing or anything like that, because it's like that's actually how we figure a lot of cool things out. sometimes it sucks, and certainly emotionally, it's really can be difficult to deal with. But there's no point in beating yourself up unless you have a time machine. And like you said, going back and changing things, I don't think that's a good idea. The thing is, like, what you may think is a mistake today, or you looking back on your past, like, oh, if I could go back and change something, I would totally change it so I didn't do this thing. Well, you don't know the course correction that would occur from changing those things. It might actually not be good. You might be in a way worse place than if you'd made that particular mistake and carried on.
Yeah.
Which is like that. That's a very, I guess, I don't know. It's a healthy way to view things too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've had the thought before, like, oh, what if I met this girl like in high school or something, and then, like, if I had to change something to make that happen, I would have had to, like, maybe go hang out in a different city, and then had I done that, I probably wouldn't have met my first wife, and then my first wife wouldn't have left me after 2 months, and then I wouldn't have moved in with you and, like, formed a band and had all kinds of great music made, and
Yeah.
morphed into a business and this show and, like, all kinds of cool stuff,
Well, and not only that, but the mindset of appreciation of those things, like, you wouldn't even know what you're missing out on. Maybe
Yeah.
you end up like just getting pudgy and watching football all day. And that's your life.
Back then I wasn't the person I am now.
Yep.
Nor would she have been, and it probably wouldn't even worked, like.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that got me to thinking too, like what you were saying about us meeting up and stuff. So this is my own personal butterfly effect experience, like something that made a huge difference in the course of my life. Like, honestly, because I was thinking about this today, like, what was the most pivotal moment in my life where if I did not make this one decision, my life would be entirely different, like absolutely indistinguishable. Like, it would be totally, totally different. So back in middle school, I think it was sixth grade. Yeah, it was sixth grade. I'm not going to say the year, but it was a while ago. I had this friend
deep into the 20th century.
Yeah, at some point in the 20th century. So I had this friend who was really into computers, and every single recess, like lunch recess and stuff like that, he would be like, "Hey, we got to go to the computer lab. You're gonna love it." And I'm like, I don't like computers. I like Nintendo and stuff like that. I did not like computers, but he kept at it. He was like insistent, and I was like, "Nah, get out of here. I don't like computers." And but he kept pestering me all the time, like, "Got to go to the computer lab. You're gonna love it." And so one time I was kind of bored, and he's like, "Hey, you want to go to the computer lab?" And I was like, why the hell not? So I went there, and this is back in the days we had like Apple IIs, and I started messing around with the computers, and I was like, "Oh man, this is awesome. This is great." So the next semester, I signed up for an intro to computers class, and it, like, I started learning programming. Like, so in seventh grade, I was writing code in class. Actually, kind of funny story. I think I was in my French class, and I used to write basic programming on steno pads. So I'm like sitting there writing out this code in French class, and everybody usually wrote notes to each other and stuff. Teacher saw me writing stuff and thought I was writing a note, and she's like, "Excuse me, Eric, can I take a look at that?" And all the class was like, "Ooh," and I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I handed her the steno pad, and she looked at it and was like, "I don't even know what this is," and handed it back to me. But So the interest in computers led me to also develop an interest in electronics, which I didn't really have before that. So I got into electronics and circuit building and technology in general. My first job, in fact, ever was a job at a computer repair shop. And that ultimately I learned experience in repairing printers, which, as you might know, led us to build PGT back in 2006.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we started our own business fixing printers and then going back and fixing computers too. It was kind of a flourishing business. And even my current IT job is a product of PGT, and ultimately all the way back to that sixth grade decision to go into that computer lab. Because, well, first off, the experience with computers, also the fact that when we were running the business, people who ran the IT stuff at the company I work at were also customers of ours. So they knew me when I applied after we shut down the business. So that led to the current job. And ultimately, it even resulted in this very YouTube channel that you're watching this video. Like, this wouldn't have happened if I didn't go into that computer lab in sixth grade. Also, even crazier, writing music. I used to play music on keyboards and little instruments and stuff, but actually writing songs didn't happen until I got into computers. And it was when I started discovering synthesized music and sequencing and all this stuff that it really like took off. Like I was like, oh my God, I love this. So I probably would not have written the 2,000 plus songs that I've written if it were not for that moment. In fact, you, Casey, also learned from me. Like, we collaborated on stuff and built like our band that we created that's still essentially running to this day is a product of all that. Like,
yeah.
So to think all that time ago, that one decision yielded all of that. And if that didn't happen, things would be totally different.
Well, and music's a huge part of who I am. And my butterfly effect happened like at birth. Like I was given up for adoption. Had that not happened,
oh yeah,
like I would be, I mean, like, apart from his features, I find nothing about him familiar. Like,
oh
like
yeah,
seriously, like I've met my biological family, and there's not really any like musical inclination in the family, like to a great degree.
But your dad, your adopted dad, like he's
Yeah,
very much musical.
yeah, he majored in music in college. It was a huge part of his life. He was a great singer. We listened to music all the time. I grew up on everything from Queen to Beethoven records, like Creedence Clearwater Revival and Genesis, and like all kinds of really like cool, like like multi-layered stuff.
Yeah,
From classical and jazz and rock and all that stuff, and
a broad variety.
And I was classically trained in music. I learned some instruments. I learned how to read and write music, and I could play things by ear, and I could hear sounds and like conceive of a note in my head without an instrument and all that stuff, and that like blended. Like I remember always thinking, like, once I finally got a computer, I was like, I wish I could use a computer to write music. I wish there was a program for that. And then I met you, and you were like, oh, there totally is. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it's so cool. Like I often think about like who I would have been if I wasn't adopted, and I hate it. Like,
exactly. Like, and if you weren't adopted, you would probably not live in Tacoma. We would not have met. And just as I influenced you in music, you influenced me too. Like, if you think about that time period from maybe what was it, 01 on, That's kind of where it began, where we were kind of like exchanging music and building on stuff that each other made. Like that would not have happened.
20 years, geez.
I know, it's crazy, but like we would not have had a partner in crime to do this thing, and so that entire thing would be entirely different. Most songs, well, I would venture to argue that from that point on, every song that I've written would never have happened. It would have been something entirely different.
That's
if it
true.
weren't for us meeting. Like, well, I mean, we met before that, but us like collaborating after having met.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like, man, like these chance encounters, this like, what are the odds? We met. Where do we meet at Sherry's or something? Or
I think it was Sherry's. Yeah. And
yeah. And that's another thing. If I didn't get into coffee and, meet certain people that were like, hey, we hang out at Sherry's, I wouldn't have been at Sherry's to meet you.
right.
So it's like there's so many different factors at play here.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's crazy. And that this is the thing that I think about, that you think, oh, well, I'd like to go back in time and change that one thing, that one mistake. I should have made this decision instead of that. Well, that decision, though you regret it or feel bad about it or think that it resulted in a negative outcome, led you down this path that made all of the things happen that led to where you currently are today. And if you change one variable, like the butterfly, just flapping its wings, all the other variables are impacted.
Yeah.
So you can't just change that one thing without screwing everything, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could be the most insignificant thing. Like you could be at the grocery store and be like, I want a snack. Do I want these cherry Pop-Tarts, or do I want to grab this last box of mint fudge protein bar thing? I'll grab the last protein bar, and then some guy comes in and he's fresh off a workout and he's like, man, I got to get me a mint fudge protein bar. I just had a great workout. And he goes over and it's gone. And he's like, that's it. That's the last straw. I'm not working out anymore. And like he could have been like Mr. Universe or something. And you just screwed him over because
exactly
he didn't get the Pop-Tart,
Well, and like even the decision, maybe you realize you need gas, you're driving and you think, well, I should probably get gas, right? Well, I think I have enough to get home. So in that scenario, you could choose to get gas or try to go home. Maybe in the latter case, you run out of gas and are stranded on the side of the road and a bunch of crazy things happen. Like, I don't know, like some random person walks up to you that you would not have met if you hadn't run out of gas or whatever. Or, maybe you decide to get gas and that delay causes you to get in an accident, which results in somebody dying or yourself dying. Like these are these divergent paths that we don't know. Like, and this is where this whole entire idea of the butterfly effect is so important to consider when it comes to time travel. Like,
yeah,
it's been said that just like stepping on a bug could change the course of history if you went back in time. One tiny variable. Because you could say, well, what could that bug possibly do? Well, maybe that bug flew up in somebody's face and they were like, ah, and it took them a few extra seconds and that delayed them, or who knows what. They spent a bunch of time in their house trying to catch the bug because the bug got into the house that you otherwise would have stepped on. Like,
nothing is insignificant.
Exactly. And as such, the good positive takeaway is is that none of us are insignificant. Every single person matters.
Yeah.
Everybody, everything you do.
Did you just say all lives matter?
Not in so many words. Wait a minute. I said it in fewer words or more. Yeah.
This reminds me of the minute microscopy I did on like choose your own adventure, which you should put up there.
Yeah.
That was kind of a fun one. Because that really is what it's like to kind of like look back on your life and be like, what would have been different if I had decided to major in this or that instead of that, what I did, and or even anything like way less significant than that. Or I don't know, I shouldn't even say less significant because you don't know the impact. Like
that's true.
Your degree choice could actually be like nothing compared to stepping on a bug.
You actually can only discover the significance in hindsight after the fact, and in thinking about this, going back through my life and the things that happened and how one thing led to another and the branches, like, wow, one tiny thing led to all that. Like, wow, holy shit, like how different would it be? And that's the thing, you can't know how different it would be. And so that's what I'm saying about regret is pointless, is because sure, you can regret making a decision, but you don't know the outcome of the alternate decision. So why bother concerning yourself with lamenting a quote unquote poor decision?
Well, we always have that fear of missing out, but we're always basing it on what we expect would have happened.
Yeah.
Which we, of course, don't know.
No, exactly. And that's why people lose money in the crypto market.
Yeah.
Oh man, wow, this is a pretty heavy episode.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's good stuff to reflect upon, and especially given like my recent, I don't want to say suicidal. It was not quite that, but like the thought of not being around anymore, for whatever the reason was, would have certainly somewhere down the road had pretty significant impact, I'm sure. So,
oh yeah,
stuff like that really is like things that people just need to keep in the back of their head. Things can be shitty for a long time, but when the good stuff finally comes around, and this is something I've been kind of looking back on, it's like, I might have been pretty damn bummed about things not working out with getting married and being a dad or whatever, but at least I had 2 months of a taste of that.
Yeah,
which is more than I had before that. So like, at least I had that.
and that's something that I was thinking about when we did that live stream too. I think I mentioned it, that you now have a totally different perspective of what you want, something you would never have had before.
Yeah.
So perhaps this experience was just something to show you that and nothing else.
Yeah, because I mean, I always was kind of on the fence about, do I want kids? Like, I've always kind of, had like conversations with myself in my head about like learning moments, like if I had a kid, this is something I would tell my kid or whatever,
Same here.
I was always kind of just reserved on whether or not I actually wanted a kid. And, some of that was like, I didn't feel I was ready. I didn't feel I could provide for them. And then when I got to the point that I couldn't actually have kids anymore. And, I was getting older and blah, 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 like, and so, it still isn't something that I definitely know I need in my life, just because it's not necessarily practical for me to like make that a goal at this age. And
Yeah.
things like that. And I'm not rich either. So like, adoption would be like tricky, but like and that's why I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that like, at least I got a couple months of it, like I think if you had a person who had a 2-month-old infant that died and you said, would you change anything? They'd probably say no, because at least they got to have that love for 2 months. Right.
Sure. Well, and
So
it's about more than us. It's also about everyone else. Like, think about the impact you've had on those kids' lives.
yeah,
What changes have occurred that you don't know about that might change the course of the future? Like,
I know, like, objectively, I know I had a positive impact on those kids, and that does help. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the important thing to realize too. Like, sure, for us, our own failures and circumstances might suck, but when you consider the impact that you've had, which by the way is a lot bigger than you think, um,
Yeah.
uh, it, it, it's sort of like, well, it really doesn't matter. Like, you can feel good that you've actually left a lasting impact, which, I think is what everybody wants. People make a big stink out of carrying on their last name or their family lineage or something. It's like, you know what? Fuck that. What about carrying on ideas or inspiring somebody or changing somebody's mind? Like, that has an effect. That is a real thing. Like,
Well,
however you sign your name is really irrelevant.
here's a butterfly effect for you. Here's how I positively affected those kids' lives. Even the way everything played out, actually. In fact, because of how everything played out. Um, I met this girl, and things went pretty fast or whatever. And at the time, her oldest had recently moved back in with his biological dad, and wasn't necessarily happy, but then he saw how happy his mom was, and he met me, and he saw, hey, here's a really awesome guy that I click with, and he decided he wanted to come back and live with his mom. And then that created like this crazy court battle thing, right? And that like stressed her out, and then it like overloaded her, and she decided she just needed to be alone and broke up with me, and everything freaked out or whatever. But like, right before we stopped talking altogether, I found out that they had finally settled on like a 50-50 split instead of like a big child support custody battle thing. Like, they finally found like common ground that wouldn't have happened had he not wanted to like get back to living with his mom, because I was in the picture, and his mom's way better than his dad. So like, it's a whole better situation for that kid. And as a result, his younger brother, who looks up to him, and like, the family dynamic is there and everything, and she's a great mom and all that stuff. So like, even though I was there briefly and I'm not allowed to be part of it anymore, I still left a positive. So
I would say that's a very significant positive.
mm-hmm.
Like,
And
man.
I gotta look for the silver lining, right?
Yeah,
Can't dwell
exactly.
on it forever. So
True. Well, I mean, we don't have time machines, so we can't go back and change the past.
yeah,
And then, like, as we've talked about, maybe we don't want to. Um,
yeah.
uh,
Maybe
like,
we don't.
and
Better things could be on the horizon.
true. Well, and what if actually this just occurred to me? People would say, well, yeah, I would go back in time until that one British soldier, pulled the trigger, that's going to become like a really bad man. You should take him out right now while you still can. Even if you showed him the future of what it like the Holocaust and all this crazy stuff. If Hitler was killed, the entire world might be totally different.
Might be.
It would be,
Yeah.
but it might actually be worse off. The course of things, how they happened, could have resulted in something even bigger that we can't foresee. We couldn't have possibly predicted. That's the thing. Like, we developed nuclear weapons specifically to attack Germany. The war over there ended before that, and we, I don't know, we got these bombs. Let's use them on Japan. So we did, even though Japan was going to surrender. That's a whole nother story. But because of that development, we have nuclear power, which is really the future. Like from a climate change standpoint, like if you're not serious about nuclear, you're not serious about climate change. Just going to throw that out there. Also, the MAD philosophy, mutually assured destruction, though it sounds really scary, actually has prevented a lot more war than would have happened without such devastating weapons. Like all of the technological innovations, all the medicine, the lives that were saved because of that, lives that were improved and stuff. Like, I know a lot of people, millions of people died because of that. But it's possible that out of all that tragedy came a glimmer of hope, something good.
Well, we discussed this in a lightning round briefly, but the bioethics of the scientific studies that the Nazis did on the Jews gave us so much advancement in medical knowledge and how to save lives and stuff like that. Like you could argue that more lives have been saved by the Holocaust than were lost.
Yeah. Now I don't want to
really fucked up, but
I don't
true.
I don't want to get into the trolley problem right there, because that's kind of messed up. But like there are positives, there are good things that came out of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say we wouldn't have come across those. It's just that, like, in the time that it would have taken, perhaps we could have lost a lot of people.
Yeah, we came across them a lot sooner, which ultimately saved quite a few lives.
Yeah. And it's like that with nuclear too. Like maybe we would have come up with it a year later, 10 years later, whatever. But, it came out when it did. And, maybe that year earlier or whatever, let's say it would have, if it wasn't for World War II, it would have been a year later. But climate change and all that stuff, maybe like some point we'll come across the secret to fission, right? And like build some kind of like super like clean energy that like reverses things, or like lets us get off the planet and go somewhere else, and it's just in the nick of time. But if we didn't have that year gap, we would have just been dead meat, Yeah,
dead meat. Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. That time is definitely a factor. Also, people who are alive is a factor. Who are the people working on these projects? Who are the people contributing their ideas to things? Yeah. What if they were dead? These brilliant physicists and stuff that worked on the Manhattan Project and stuff. Like, and also the funding. That was a huge project. There was a lot of resources that went into that. If we had not done that work in advance, we wouldn't have that information now. So if the scenario you're talking about, where it's like we only have a year, the giant flaming meteorite's coming down, we got to figure things out. Like, if we didn't have that already, there's no way. The people who did that are dead now. How are we going to do it? Oh man, it's just, And it all comes back to one simple, tiny point of deviation, something really small that nobody would care about. They'd be like, well, whatever, you stopped at the gas station. Well, guess what? That changed the entire course of the planet because I was delayed for 5 minutes pumping gas.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
If you connect the dots far enough, yeah, every little thing you do is going to have a major impact somewhere. You'll probably never know it, of course.
Well, you might be dead before the impact is actually felt, too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, man, and this is the thing about the butterfly effect that like blows my mind is it makes me really contemplate the scale of things, the unpredictability, like how important every tiny little thing is. Not to get people like hyper focused on tiny details, because in fact we shouldn't worry about that stuff because of this.
No, yeah, like don't try to think about how it's gonna impact, like a war in the Middle East or something, because like you're just gonna fry your brain.
Well, and I don't think there's a way to know.
You'll get like the worst anxiety ever. Like,
yeah. Well, it goes both ways. I mean, there's no way to know the outcome of your decision and what it influences. No way to know that. And also, there's no way to go back and change the past. And if you did, well, things might be worse. So just say la vie, right? Live life, enjoy things, be a good person. Yeah. Try to do good in the world. That's what I try to do. Like teach people things, and I don't know, just
in my way, I've tried to be a good person.
No, you haven't. Oh, wait, this is a throwback to a previous recording that we did.
When?
Oh man, I seriously encourage people, like, no matter what, like if you are in a really good position in life, or if you're in a really bad position in life, you think things are terrible, just think back and think about, don't just skip to the thing that you think you should have done, but rewind little by little and look at the course of events and how the previous one influenced the current one. Like really think about it and realize, like, this is so complex. It's so over everybody's head. It's crazy. I don't know.
And think about what you actually did that triggered other people to do things, and how that might have affected their life or the world.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said earlier, if I didn't meet you at that chance encounter, like, we wouldn't be doing this. We would not be recording this episode right now. We would not have started a business together. All of our music would be different. Like, it's kind of crazy. And there's probably thousands of other things.
And our business may not have been much, but had we not had the business, maybe somebody wouldn't have been able to print a report and in time and would have been fired, and that person would never have gone on to like start the business that like ends world hunger or something. It could be anything.
Yeah.
Like no matter how little or insignificant you think you are, you're a cog in the machine that leads to good and bad things. Like it's not just inspirational, it's also nihilistic, but
yeah,
it's life.
Exactly. Oh man, I don't want to get into like the subject.
Like you'll definitely do shit that'll lead to bad things.
True. I don't want to get into the subjective nature of like what is good and what is bad, because I think we'd go on for another hour.
Yeah.
At that point,
I mean, like there's a whole discussion to be had on like things that we do butterfly effect probably kills people too.
Yeah.
Like you're probably responsible for the death of tens of people, hundreds of people, maybe,
Or millions.
yeah, just by buying a Pop-Tart, you know.
Well, and think about the case of the World War I soldier. He spared the life of somebody. He thought he was doing a good thing.
Yeah,
He's like, hey, this is a guy, he's injured. I'm going to let him go. I'm not going to kill him. But it was Hitler,
right.
like,
Well, I've thought of this like culpability in death, right? Like things that you do that lead to something, right, aren't necessarily your fault either, right? So like I take the train to work every day, and one day I was thinking like, there was, weeks back there was a fatality on the tracks up in Auburn, and I had to end up taking a bus or whatever, and I started thinking like, it has got to be so stressful to be a train conductor because even if you saw somebody on the tracks, you cannot stop the train in time.
mm-hmm.
You have to sit there in the knowledge that you're controlling a giant multi-thousand ton piece of steel, and like you're killing someone, but like it's also not your fault, right?
Yeah, because
But
there's
like
nothing you could do about it. You can't avert that.
any more than the passenger in the back of the train can't do anything about it, like,
Yeah.
but the conductor would still feel more culpability being in control of the train, even though the guy sitting reading his newspaper who has no clue what's going on at the front of the train
Yeah.
is just as responsible. Well,
Well, and
just as not responsible, I should say.
exactly. Well, I guess that's kind of the takeaway there is like, sure, the conductor has control of the train, but only within a certain margin, right? Like they can't just stop on a dime.
Right.
They can't veer away. They're on a track. So at that point, if there's some idiot standing on the train tracks, what can you do? There's nothing you could do. So you shouldn't feel responsible for that, because the only reason you should feel responsible is if you could have actually averted it.
Right.
And that actually translates into many things in life. Like if you goes back to what I was saying, if you could control the state of every particle in the universe, sure, feel regret, feel like you're responsible for that. But you can't stop the train. I mean, you could pull the brake or whatever modern trains use, but you can't stop the train quick enough to avoid that collision and save a life.
Yeah.
So
and I would argue that even you shouldn't even feel bad about being culpable through neglect. Like, oh, I was looking at my cell phone or something, and it's like, well, if you weren't looking at your cell phone, you could have been checking your blind spot. You could have been doing anything.
taking a piss.
Yeah, like, well, I'm thinking like while driving a car, but I guess you could be taking a piss while driving a car because
I've tried
we've
that.
done a whole episode on that too. But yeah, like just because you could have done something different doesn't mean that like what you did differently would have led to a different result.
Yeah.
You could have been fiddling with the radio. You could have been, checking out a hot girl or whatever, like whatever it is that took your attention away and you plowed into somebody and killed them. Like there's a million scenarios where that would have happened anyway.
Exactly. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean people shouldn't try to avoid being negligent.
Right.
Like, you really should, especially taking past lessons to heart, right? Like it's the engineer in me, right? We make mistakes. We should learn from them and try to make things better for the future. But you can't lament a lapse in attention or, I mean, we're fucking human. We're not robots after all.
Well,
and even robots have to charge. Is a robot gonna, Are you going to blame a robot because it ran out of juice and had to charge up and couldn't save somebody, or
Well,
something like that?
the attention span thing with driving, like years ago, there was a study done that having a conversation with a passenger in your car is equally as distracting as texting while you're driving. And that makes perfect sense because it's not the act of like staring at your phone necessarily, because you can like scan while you're doing that, but like it's focus. You're taking your focus off the road and you're having a conversation. It's the conversation, not the device.
Exactly. And I think Mythbusters did a test like comparing texting to being drunk, and they found it was basically the same effect. Like you might as well be drunk if you're texting.
It's focus more than anything.
Yeah. Well, and, I hear people all the time say, "Oh, I multitask." It's like, no, you don't. The brain is kind of capable of parallel processing, but not in the way that people think. You can task yourself with one thing at a time. If you try to multitask, they all fall apart.
Yeah. Even computers aren't capable of having over 100% of their processing power being used.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, so like you can either give 100% to driving, or you can divvy it up between a few different things. Like there's no in between.
So you can put 50% to this, 50% to that, but exactly. You can't have more than 100%.
Yeah. And so that said, like we can't expect there to be distractionless driving ever. It's not possible.
I would argue even in computers, even with self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, and things like that, that is still going to be an issue.
Oh, yeah, good point.
And that might be, we should probably do an episode about autonomous vehicles.
We should, yeah. That's actually a really good point. Like they may be quicker, but they're certainly not infallible.
Yeah. Well, now here's the thing. Like the computers are quicker with certain things, especially dealing with numbers, variables, things like that. But complex things, being able to say like determine the difference between a ball and a little kid chasing the ball, that is not so easy for computers. But a person, you could do it in basically like a millisecond. You're like, oh yeah, I'm going to veer for the ball instead of the kid. But a computer might have trouble with that.
Here's the other thing that an autonomous car would not be able to do. I was a passenger, granted, this one time, but I was in the back seat of my parents' car with my wife at the time or something. We were on our way to dinner somewhere. We were at a red light and it just turned green and we were starting to go, and way ahead, like there was this big hill coming down from an apartment complex. And I saw some kids like in a wagon that were just like, wee, just like rolling down the wagon towards this like busy ass street. And I was just like, stop, like I wanted to like jump out and run over and like stop the kid or whatever. But like, I wouldn't have been able to do that if there was an autonomous car that was just like scanning a certain perimeter. Right.
Yeah. Cause it's looking at the road.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And I couldn't just jump out of a moving vehicle or whatever and then somehow move faster than that vehicle to go stop the kid or whatever,
and you can't change the laws of physics too. So if you're already in motion and a wagon full of kids suddenly appears in front of a vehicle moving like 30 miles an hour, there's no way it's going to stop in time. But a human can see the problem well in advance, like, oh yeah, and even get into like very complex methods of thinking. Oh, there's a ball bouncing across the street, and you could think in your head, oh, a ball bouncing probably means there's a kid chasing it. But a computer, there's no way it's going to know that. Like AI,
unless you program it.
Well, you can, but it's a very difficult thing. It's a very abstract thing to program into computers.
Yeah.
In machine learning, I have a lot of hope for it. I'm sure it's probably going to Skynet us at some point. But in the meantime, it's a good system. But we shouldn't become so reliant on it so early, because it is very. It's like a child. Like it's too early. A lot of possibilities there, but
Yeah.
I mean, self-driving cars and stuff. Sure, we should be investigating that. We should be testing it. We should be trying it.
That's a good point. Like, we need to look at machine learning and AI as if it's just an infant or a toddler at this point, maybe.
Yeah.
But like, it's going to take time for it to learn the ways of the world.
Yeah. Do you remember 20q.net? The machine learning website, the 20 questions. I think it actually still exists. So 20q.net was kind of like a online version of the game 20 questions, where you pick like a category like animal, vegetable, or mineral or whatever. And then you ask some questions, and then there's answers like, oh, is it smaller than a bread box? Can it fit in a shoe or something? And then eventually you collect enough information to put it together into a picture. And 20q, my favorite thing, and you're gonna love this one. The thing that always stumped 20q.net was when I picked a ninja as my thing. It could never figure that out. Although, and it's kind of unfortunate because it used to show you like what it was thinking, the kind of hierarchy of thoughts, like, oh, these are the possibilities. And you could be like, oh, I see it coming. I see the ninja. It's in the stack. But they don't do that anymore. But it's gotten a lot smarter. And in fact, I think it actually guessed ninja. And I feel like it's because of me constantly testing that system to guess ninja that it can now do that. But that's the thing. It's like, that was a fun online game that we'd play back in like the early 2000s. And it might, like, my just fun challenge of throwing a ninja out there might make a difference in the future of machine learning and AI.
Is it bigger than a bread box? Does it use lasers? It is a ninja.
I would challenge everybody to go check it out because it's fun. It's really, really fun. And it collects information, not in a bad way, but in a good way. Like, every time it plays the game, it realizes the mistakes it's made and catalogs them for the future. Like, okay, this person said I was guessing a cricket and I got it wrong. So these are the things that went wrong throughout the course of that. Well, it's like an engineering thing. It's really cool. I have a lot of hope for the future. Robots. I used to really be, this is the thing about changing your mind about stuff. I used to be terrified by the Boston Dynamics Spotbot, that dog robot. They had some early iterations that were like gas powered and horrific, honestly, like just Cthulhu level terrifying. But now that Spotbot is so cool and so cute, and it's actually being used in real world scenarios. There's in fact a power station, a dam actually, that is not manned because it's in a really inaccessible place. So most of the year people can't get there. It's impractical to get there. So they thought, hey, we'll try out the Spotbot. we'll throw him in there. He could do the inspections and check things and stuff like that. And so this little dog robot like hops around, waddles up and down stairs and looks at things for the humans. And it's awesome. Like, it is. I want one. I want one so bad, but they're so fucking expensive. Like,
it's kind of interesting that the machine learning can catalog all that stuff and learn from its mistakes and quickly recall things and cross catalog or whatever, and yet the human brain has like 2.5 petabytes of memory available, and yet we can't even compete with that already. Like,
well, in a way we can, maybe not quite in such a concise way, but like that whole scenario I was saying before about you see a ball bouncing and determine, oh, there must be a kid behind it. All of that happens in the blink of an eye. Like, and we take the totality of our experience to determine that.
right.
Like, all that
because we have sensory input, we have logic, and we have emotion as well.
Memories too. That's the other thing we recall. So, I mean, we're an organic computer.
And analogy. I don't think computers, even AI, probably isn't even capable of analogy, is it?
Or abstract thinking, like being able to extrapolate from two totally disconnected things and put them together in something that actually is plausible.
Right.
That's a very human thing. Oh man, this has gone down like a really cool path. But it is connected. Like, there are parallels between the butterfly effect and machine learning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, man.
If I could go back in time, I think I would go hang out with guys like Socrates and be like, yo, you guys got to come be guests on Kitchen Sink Microscopy, like 4,000 years in the future here.
Wouldn't that be cool? Like a Bill and Ted kind of thing? Like, Socrates. We've got Socrates on tonight. Oh man. It would be interesting though to
we got a totally bodacious guest, Socrates, on the show.
Wild stallions. Yeah, it would be interesting to go back and I think in terms of time travel, I would not really be inclined to change things because I don't claim to be intelligent enough or world understand the world enough to know the best decisions. But it'd be really, really cool to have people to talk to, like ask questions of all of these important people throughout history.
Like if time travel happened in a vacuum, like nothing changed, it was just like a separate pocket of a multiverse or whatever. Yeah, that would be kind of cool. Well, that's the thing, right? If you go back in time and change the past, it's basically just creating a branch that you'll never actually experience, assuming you return to the exact same little pocket of the multiverse.
Oh, right? Man, we're getting all John Teeter now. Oh, man. Well, yeah, I would prefer to observe, like objectively see what happened in these events. Go all 4K or 8K or whatever we have and record things and bring it back to the present so we can better understand what happened back then. Because all we have until, it was like the 1800s when we invented photography. Before that, it was storytelling. And we all know how fallible that is. So I mean,
yeah, I remember like mythology class, they would teach us about how nobody wrote this stuff down. They just passed it on story to story. And they memorized it word for word. And I'm like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
Like, for real? Like, are you
So,
sure?
yeah, the only way you could know that is if you knew the original story that somebody told by like a campfire or something like that, and compared it with something from now. Yeah, we don't know, but they did. They definitely did. That was a common thing, like oral tradition and stuff, passing things down. I mean, that has nothing
Verbatim. I don't know.
Yeah. Oral tradition does not have anything to do with fellatio or cunnilingus. Just telling you.
Oh,
I know. History class would have been a lot more fun if that were the case. But
I'm sure for some people, history class did include that, but not nerds like us.
I'm not going to name any names. But yeah, like we don't know. So knowing the reality of things would be really valuable to me. Like I want to see how the Great Pyramid of Giza was actually built. Like, what did they do? How did they raise those obelisks in the middle of the desert? Huh?
Milk crates.
Milk crates, yeah. Oh man. Oh, if only TikTok existed in the Egyptian times. Milk crate challenge. Oh man. What? But it could be because we can't see that. We don't know. All we have is someone else's word to go off of, and it gets more obscure the further back in time you go, where language was very obfuscated and very fuzzy. Oh man, wow, this definitely went down like a completely crazy path, but I totally knew it would.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
It's got pretty meta, not like Facebook meta, but like real meta.
Facebook. They renamed the company to Meta. Oh my god! Like, really? Could you have chosen a cheesier name than that? Really? Oh man, I can't wait for the memes. I love the memes.
Oh, there's already like, Zuckerberg was like, I don't know, like a press conference or something, but he had like this decorative shelf, and it for some reason had like a bottle of Baby Ray's barbecue sauce on it or something.
Oh man. Well, and speaking of language, memes, emojis and things are the new evolution of language. I mean, I don't want to go down too many different paths here, but that kind of occurred to me that like there will be a time in probably our lifetimes where we won't speak like in the traditional sense. We will be sending memes and smileys.
I can communicate quite readily with memes already.
Yeah.
Like the language is absolutely affected by the butterfly effect.
It totally is. Oh yeah, like one meme being created like changes everything.
Yeah. All you have to do is convey a concept. Doesn't matter how.
Well, and isn't that what language does?
Right.
Like all you're trying to do is explain to another person what you're thinking.
A meme is no different than a gesture. Like if I go like this, like people on the podcast aren't going to see this, of course, but like if I go like this,
yeah,
like you know what that means, right?
Well, now I'm thinking of that shrug emoji that involves like a bunch of characters and stuff.
Yeah, it's yeah, and that's why we do this show on YouTube for you podcast fans out there. Like, there's a lot of nuance that you're missing by not having that visual experience.
Exactly, and that makes me think like how many relationships were spared because of the invention of the emoji. Somebody maybe at some point thought like, wouldn't it be cute to throw in some pictures with smileys and blah blah blah, and at some point, everybody had their own ideas, but then it kind of IEC'd itself and kind of became like a central standard that everybody adheres to. But that's the thing. It's like you can say something, but it's difficult in text in our technological modern world to convey face-to-face emotion. But if you put like a little heart at the end of something or the crying, laughing thing, like everybody knows what you're talking about. You put the poop emoji, like everybody knows. It's like, and it transcends language too. That's the great thing about emojis. And that's why I say at some point, the entire planet is going to be speaking in memes and emojis because you don't need language. Like, it doesn't matter your language. It's pictorial. Well, I guess that kind of like goes back to the whole Egyptian thing and a lot of early languages, like written languages that were pictorial.
Temba, his arms open.
Yeah, Darmok was a very good episode of TNG.
Like that really is kind of a sophisticated form of language.
Really. Yeah, it is. It's like a storytelling kind of thing.
Although it does kind of the original meme, really.
It was, although it does kind of require that everybody understands the story being told.
So do memes.
But like that's true.
If I saw a meme that, well, I mean, this actually does happen. If I see a meme that has something to do with anime, which I like never watch, I have no fucking clue what's going on, really.
It is contextual, yeah. So if I said Temba at rest, like you would have had to have seen that particular Star Trek episode to know what I was talking about there.
Yeah.
If not, you'd be like, "What the fuck? What is this guy talking about?"
Yeah.
And I the thing that really hits home in Darmok is where they're trying to figure out the language differences and stuff, and how the universal translator is having problems. And Deanna Troi is like, well, Juliet on her balcony, like that was a huge change. Just speaking of the butterfly effect, like that changed the way I look at a lot of things. That particular episode, that moment in that episode really was a huge paradigm shift in my life.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't tuned in and watched that particular episode, well, I don't know, everything would be different. Because it comes down to perspective and context and things like that. Man, geez, this is
yeah, this one's going kind of long, so
yeah, I don't have enough weed for this episode. Holy shit, man. But I might have to bust into my stash tonight for this. Man.
Well, yeah, that was definitely one for the best of vault.
Oh yeah, it was. Well, TNG, like so many things were so good.
I meant this episode, like.
Oh, okay, all right.
Like our own best of vault, like.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were comparing us to TNG. Someday, maybe people will.
Yeah,
because
I mean, like, I some of my favorite episodes are the ones where we get really philosophical, because that's always been my favorite thing to discuss.
Mine too. Yeah. And okay, going back to the origin of this episode, we might not be so inclined if it weren't for Star Trek TNG.
Yeah,
because we are both big Star Trek nerds. And
I met someone recently that was like, "Oh, you like Star Trek? They have such bad stories." And I'm like,
Hmm?
"Are you wait, what?"
Bad story compared to what?
Yeah, like, have you seen it? Like, it's amazing stories. Like,
Some of the best, honestly. The Inner Light. Holy fuck! If you have not seen that, I have shed more tears from that than anything else. That was so beautiful. And those who know me know that I don't cry for sad things. I cry for beautiful things.
yeah.
Um,
And they were like more of a Star Wars fan. And I'm like, the what? The writing in Star Wars is better than okay.
oh, a
Oh,
space western has better writing than Star Trek. Okay, gotcha.
I mean, yeah, personal taste, whatever, but
True. And this is one of the things that comes up on OkCupid often. The question is like Star Trek or Star Wars, and I'm like both. It just kind of depends on what you're feeling in the moment. Like I like
yeah.
both. What it's like the people who say, "Well, you're either an ass man or a tit man." It's like both.
Yeah.
I,
Seriously.
I mean, it just depends.
I like all the parts on a woman.
Yeah, yeah. Same
So
thing.
sue me.
I don't know why it has to be mutually exclusive. It doesn't make sense. It feels very arbitrary that somebody out there decided at some point that, well, it's either this or that. It's a binary equation. You can't have both. Like, oh man. Well, man, this is going down. I feel like this could be a 2-hour episode, but we should probably stop where we are.
Yeah, we're inching up on that anyway. So
Yeah, and hopefully it's some good food for thought. Like,
yeah.
hopefully people take it to heart. I would honestly like to hear stories, thoughts, but particularly stories, how your own life, like if you reflect on your life, what thing was it that was a fulcrum, like a turning point in your life? And if you haven't thought about it, do think about it, because your life is going to feel a lot more significant when you do. Yeah.
Yeah. Fulcrum if they can't take a joke.
That has to, I want that as a t-shirt. I might just have to make that. That is genius. Oh my god. And to think, if we did not meet at Sherry's, that t-shirt might never be made. Oh man.
Well, I think it's safe to say that people are glad that the butterfly flapped its wings so that this show could be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that, you should definitely flap your butterfly wings over to patreon.com/KSMvidcast and become a patron, because you're going to get really cool songs like the one you might hear now.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a really nice one playing.
It's fluttering in on the butterfly wings.
Oh man. Oh, this is good. Well, I feel like we didn't I feel like we only just barely delved into the depth of this particular topic. So we'll probably come back to it again. If you want us to come back to it again, leave a like, share it. I don't know, maybe buy the song, whatever song it is. I don't know right now. But that goes back to what we're talking about. I have no idea what song it's going to be, but I know it's going to be awesome, because we only do awesome stuff.
That's right.
So, yeah. Well, thanks for sticking it out with us. And have a good night, everybody.
Thanks for Deep Sink Butterfly.